name is Savannah Kepley, and I'm a 7th grade middle school language arts teacher. Obviously, I teach 7th grade. And I am here to teach you or talk to you about how I do my annotations in active reading with my students. I think this is a great way to get them to start thinking about what they're reading, to start analyzing the text and reading with a purpose. Because there is a time that we read with enjoyment where we don't annotate and jot while we're reading. But during my class, when I'm teaching the novel, not just teaching the novel, I'm using the novel to teach the standards, I make sure that we're reading with a purpose. So I want to show you how I do that. So the first thing I do, obviously, is I select a text. I'm going to start reading with Ghost this year. In the past, I've done Debbie Co., I've done Schooled, I've done Chains. I mean, it doesn't matter. Just pick a book to start with. And then after I have my book or my text or short story, I go through and I'm like, okay, what is my purpose for reading it? Because we're not reading it to teach a novel. We're reading it to teach the standard. At least that's what I do. And so my first standard that I do is inference and text evidence. And so what I do is I'm like, okay, our goal is to read chapter 1 today. And I read through chapter 1. And I find places to stop where I can infer about the characters or what's going to happen based on the clues that the author is giving me. And I mark those little spots with a post-it note or a little line, or I draw in my book like I can stop here, stop here, stop here. So now that I have my stopping points, I match them up with the annotations or the jots. I use those synonymously. Yes, I use those as the same. So if I say jots, I mean annotations, and vice versa. So I batch them up with my annotations, and I think it's 9 of them. I had to write them down so I don't forget. It's hashtags, doodle, motivation, conflict, big idea, question, significant quotes, and cause and effect. And so I don't like throw those all out at one time. I teach them in order. And so one day we might focus on hashtags, or the next day we might focus on hashtags and then add in doodles, and then hashtag, add in doodles, and then the next day add in questions. And so we do this until the students understand all of the jots that I want us to do throughout the year. So this is what a jot board would look like. I just draw this on the smart board. It's nothing fancy. And then in these little corners are where we're going to put the codes. Now, when I teach my students the annotations or the jots, I teach them the codes to go with them. So for example, this is like the hashtag. I'm going to make this a little smaller. This is the doodle. Let's say we're going to do questions also, and maybe, I don't know, a motivation. And so that way we're not just writing out what jots we're doing all the time. We have our little codes here. And so I have them put them in the board before we start reading, so we're ready to go. And then when we read, it's time to stop. And let's say, I'm stopping at the point where I said I was going to stop in my book. And I'm like, all right, y'all, this is a great place. We can really see some things about the character here. So what kind of hashtags can we do about our character? So I'll write that up there, and then instead of the word character, I'll write the name, and then they'll start telling me, and I always tell them we have to do 3 hashtags in a box. So they'll be like, hashtag kind, hashtag, I don't know, good sister. I'm thinking of Chains, I guess. Hashtag, independent. That's really messy handwriting. Anyway, so I write this on the board and we talk about it together. Like the kids or the students tell me these hashtag things. And so we're writing them out there, and I'm like, great, did the author come out and say that she was kind? And they're like, no. I'm like, how did we infer that? So there I am, constantly using the standards-based vocabulary so we can teach the standards through the book, and always focusing it back to the standards. So they talk about how we can infer it, what they did to infer that she was kind, a good sister, and independent, and that kind of thing. And then we go back and we read, and I stop and I'm like, oh my goodness, y'all, I can really see what's happening in my head here. I can see the imagery. I can see the sisters on the on the horse-drawn carriage together. Can y'all see that too? And they're like, yeah. And I was like, well, can y'all see something else from this section? And sometimes people will say something, and I'm like, all right, here we are. And you don't have to write doodle, I'm just doing that so you can see it. I'm like, all right, in this box, you're going to doodle an image from this section that maybe shows that the character is independent or the character is a good sister. Something, again, that they have to infer. And they're going to use text evidence to infer it, and that's what they will doodle right here. I always tell them it does not have to be a Picasso. It could be stick figures. I even draw my great stick figures, and I'm like, oh, look, they're holding hands. She's taking care of her. Like, y'all, like that is not even a good drawing, but that's okay. And I always set a little time limit on this, because you'll always have that one student who is going to town because they're a great artist and they just want to keep going. I'm like, we need to pause. You can come and add to it later, but you need to pause right here. And then we go back to reading, and we read and we read and we read some more. And I'm like, all right, ooh, let's stop here. Now, what kind of questions can we have about what's happening in the book? And then we jot down the questions here. Now, just like hashtags, these smaller things, I make them do 3 questions in one box. And so we jot it down here. And then we go back and we read and we read and we read. And then we do a motivation. And so again, with motivation, and motivation is like why a character did something, so they're having to infer this information. And I'll be like, what motivated Isabel to stand up to Madame? And then we write it here. I'll tell them, they write down blank, or Isabel was motivated to stand up to Madame because she was trying to protect her sister. Whatever it is, they'll just write it right here. I'll write it on the board. They tell me, I write it, and then we're done with our jots for today. So I love this, because what we have here is evidence of our thinking while we're reading. And it's evidence of us applying the standards to our novel instead of just teaching the novel. And it also teaches our students to stop and think about what they're reading. And I just love it, because they'll go back and look at their jot board, or they'll go back to a certain chapter in their jots and be like, oh yeah, this is what happened, or, you know, like that kind of thing. I think it's great. It's a great documentation of their thinking. Now, I always tell them, like, we really don't do this in real life. Like, when I'm sitting down reading some of my fun books, you know, I don't jot when I read, but I definitely stop and I think about it. But we have to develop those skills in our students, and this is a great way to do that. And even though we don't do this in what I call real life when I'm reading for fun, it is a valuable skill, because when they have complex text, they need to have this in their toolbox, right? They need to know how to stop and think and annotate, so they will start to understand what they're reading. Now, if you're like, yes, I want to do some of this with my students, I want to teach my students how to be active readers, I do have this available. It's on Teachers Pay Teachers, and I also have it on my website, ELA Unlimited, where you can download what you need when you need it to help you in the classroom or help you teach creatively and engage your students. And what else was I going to say? Oh yeah, the bundle, it comes with the posters, and then it also has some activities that you can do with your students, like a choice board, and I have jot stars and like a tic-tac-toe activity that you can do with your students to help them become active readers and to practice these skills. I hope this helps you teach your students to stop and think about what they're reading. I also hope this helps you visualize how to take the standards and apply them to your novel instead of teaching the novel. If you're into that kind of thing, if you're a standards-based teacher, then I encourage you to try this out. And it gets students to stop and think, and not just like read through and not even thinking about why they're reading what they're reading. Anyway, if you have any questions, just let me know. Comment below, send me an email, whatever. I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. And I hope you have a great day. Happy teaching. Bye.